Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of PPE and You, Mask Making Edition, with your host, yours truly, Eric Miller. Let's get started. Hopefully everyone downloaded the pattern from the University of Florida. Put on a simple normal sheet of paper and let's get started. What I like to do is mount this on a piece of cardboard, or cardstock would be ideal if you had it, but I seem to have run out, so we're going to use a cardboard box. So here we have our little friendly cardboard box, and I'm going to use a standard box cutter. Cut the rough outline of this, enough so the piece of paper can still fit on it. Got a piece of cardboard, got our pattern, should fit on there. Looks like it roughly fits. Ideal. A little bit of tape. Probably the easiest thing to do is put a little bit of folded tape like this to make it double-sided. And voila, you've got yourself double-sided tape. I, however, have real double-sided tape. The good thing about this is you can work with it quite easily once you get the hang of it. Put it somewhere within the pattern boundary. Like that and that. Cut a little piece of it. And then peel it back. Put this down on our piece of cardboard. Now it's not going anywhere. This thing, by the way, is extremely sharp. Be very careful with it. Okay, use a straight edge on the easy parts. We're going to take the outline, basically this outer curved part, and cut that. I'm going to cut the straight parts first. Easy. Press down this guy, cuts beautifully. Another trick about this cutter is to never actually cut through tape with it, because it leaves a residue on it, and that residue just screws up all your cuts after that. Now, got the next little part here. This part's not too bad when you're cutting into this vertice here. You can overshoot it a little bit when you're cutting the pattern, but when you're cutting the actual fabric, do not do that. Otherwise, you will ruin the fabric and it becomes non-suitable for PPE, because you'll have an actual hole in one of your key joints. Good thing actually to sit in a rolling chair, because you can rotate your body more easily this way. Actually, I'm going to take this part that we just cut. Should actually just remove it. For smaller joints, it's nice to have a little X-Acto knife to get the little cut out parts and parts that. Alright, here's one little piece. Don't need that anymore. Throw that away. Stick with me on this part. I know it's boring, but there's a couple key points here in a minute that I'm going to bring out. Okay. By the way, I'm cutting on one of these cutting mats, which are just fantastic because they're self-sealing. Even though you cut into it, it doesn't leave a mark. You can't see any visible marks here. And you wouldn't want to use any other surface because you would mark it up like your table or whatever. Put a little bit more tape in here. Keep it down. Now we're going to take the pattern that we have glued or taped to a piece of cardboard, and we're going to make one more modification that's kind of important. what I do is I look at all these points where we're going to need to see on the fabric where we sew to. So this is like a zigzag stitch that's going to need to go in this far. Well, how are we going to know that when this is obscuring the fabric, or when we just have a cut pattern of fabric with all of these lines on it? So I'm going to actually mark these points here. There, here, 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 and right here as well. That's the dart. The dart is a section where it's going to compress the fabric so that it fits better to your shin. Let's mark the last of these points. So anywhere where there's a strap that's going to come in, or anywhere there's a dart. Now, I also like to take a hole punch. Over here. And make a little cut right here where the larger of the two lines intersects. These smaller ones, I haven't seen anybody who can use that small of a fold, so I use the larger one. So actually put the hole punch between those two lines on the edge. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. I'm going to take this, make a little punch. So I end up with a hole kind of like that. I'm going to do that in all the points where the darts intersect the edge of the pattern. There's 4 in total. Oh, sorry, I'm going to lie. 4 for the darts and 2 for each one of the straps. So I'm going to do this here. So you can see now I've done it there. I'm also going to do it here, there, all on the edge. You'll see why I'm doing this here in a minute. It makes a whole lot of sense when you actually need to draw some reference points on the fabric itself. The good thing about cardstock is that it doesn't compress, so like you can't squish the edge. Like here it's granulated and you can actually squish that down. Anyway, so now we have all our little divot points, and there's one last thing we need to do, which is all these interior points. Actually, I wonder if the hole punch would reach that far in. That would be ideal. Let's try that. And it does. So I'm actually going to punch a hole on those points. That's better. Before I was using a knife and making a little hole here, but this is much better because we have to put the pen tip through that hole so we can make a mark on the fabric later, and this is a whole lot easier. Okay, one last one are the actual darts. We got to do the darts too. The dart apex, this point right here. I hope I can reach it with this hole punch. It's deep in there. Oh shoot, I can't reach it. Yeah, it can't be reached, so for those particular ones you need a knife, and you're gonna like dig it in there. Dig it in that point and rotate. Oh, you'll see what I mean here in a minute. Punching through and just twisting, like that, to make a nice deep hole. I'm going to clear that hole out as much as you possibly can, because when you put the pen in there, it ends up making the sides soggy with the amount of ink that gets poured through there. I can't reach that point with this thing, so I'm going to use a box cutter, kind of saw off that extra point there, because you want the surface to be flat when it touches the fabric. So now you can see that I have taken those apex points and put a nice little hole through them as well. So we have a bunch of holes all over the place so we can draw reference points on our actual fabric. So let's get to cutting out the fabric. So each of you should have some of this Halyard 600 material. So now we're going to actually take our pattern and we're going to cut our fabric. Now before you do that, what I do is I set up the fabric in such a way that I fold it and then clip it together using like binder clips. And if you have any other kind of clip, hair beret, whatever, that should work as well. And I fold it into 1, 2, 3, 4, so that there are basically 4 layers of the material. Each layer itself consists of 2, right? Because there's the white and the blue is sealed together. So that's 1 layer. 2, 3, 4. So fold the whole thing so essentially there are at any point 4 layers. Now, again, I've clipped it together with clips so that it doesn't move when you are cutting your pattern. So let's cut a pattern. Take a look down here. And we will take this material here and focus on that. Okay. So now we have our pattern, and we set it somewhere in our fabric. Not really that important where you put it, but what is important is once you start it, you do not move it. So you can try tricky things like taping it down maybe or something like that, but I just use a lot of pressure, and I use the cutter. So let's get our cutter out, and I just put a lot of pressure on it when I do it. So I'm going to start over here, kind of rock back and forth, and it'll dig into it and get down in there. What's good though is we're essentially, taking the material so that we can create like 8 masks at once. If the corner gets too difficult, I just kind of cut it off and then come back. Take all this material, don't need that. Come at it again. Gotta put some force behind this because we're cutting through a lot of layers of fabric. You can cut through fewer layers, but this is more efficient once you get the hang of it. Okay, so I cut off that piece. And don't pick it up and rotate it or anything like that. If anything, you just stand up and move. Because if you try and pick it up and rotate it, you're going to shift all the layers underneath and they're all going to be uneven. Now here's what I meant before when I said do not cut into this apex. Leave a little bit of room at the end and cut with a X-Acto knife or something else, because if you cut in there, you essentially ruin the mask immediately. Okay, last step here. I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut into that apex very carefully. Just don't want to overshoot the apex in either cardinal direction. Slide all these pieces out of here and all cut. Save some of the bigger pieces for later. If you're unsure about how to sew a stitch or something like that, you can use those kind of pieces as practice pieces. And voila! We have just cut a whole slew of mask templates. So, take this off now. We are going to use it. I'm going to set aside most of this material. They come in sets of 2, a blue piece and a white piece. The white piece is always on the inside, blue piece is on the outside. Now, even as well as you did by cutting all those pieces simultaneously, there was some slippage. There almost always is. Take a piece of tape and line up these straight pieces here and here and here and here. And lift it up a little bit, holding it down with all your fingers, your fingertips. Slide the tape underneath, push it down, and then just kind of fold it over. It's going to lock this in place. If you have like sewing clips or something like that, you can use that as well, but they are currently unavailable on Amazon. And I have put in an order weeks ago and still haven't gotten them. Okay, so now these are fairly well locked together. Now put your pattern over it again, and you'll see you probably made a few small errors. If it's not too bad and it mostly matches, just keep proceeding. But if you did have some slippage or whatever, you can trim up the edges with your tool. This one looks pretty good, actually. I'm surprised. There's a little bit over here. Shave off a tiny little bit here on the edge. I mean, there's like a really small little piece that was off. That's great. Now leave it, don't move it. Take your pen and then start putting dots in all these holes. In this particular case, however, what I find is you should probably flip it so that the white side is up. Because we want to write on the interior of the mask, put dots on the interior of the mask, not on the exterior, just for aesthetic reasons. Again, line things up. Should still be good, so this is a symmetrical pattern. Okay, now take your point and just put a little dot in each one of those divots that you've made on both the perimeter and interior. There's one dot that you'll want to do extra special, which I'll show you in a minute. And going through and just putting a quick dot in there so we have reference points everywhere on the fabric. Now those two dark apex points here, you want to put it in there and hold it and leave it there for about 5 seconds because it has to bleed through the upper layer and go to the bottom layer. Because when we're folding it, to fold the dart and sew it later, that point has to be visible on the outside of the mask. So that's why we're really soaking that point in there for a bit. I'm trying to remember why we had to do that. I remember now. Okay, so we should be good. So I'm going to take this off. You see that we now have all kinds of nice reference points all around the pattern. Yay! And then these 2 points have bled through to the other side. See that? Perfect. Sorry, on all the points of the dart, because you're going to need to see them all on the outside. Turn this over. There you go. Now it looks like that. Everything's marked. Okay, the first thing I like to sew are the elastic. Just go ahead and get that inside, and the rest of it's fairly easy after that. So what we're going to do is get ourselves some elastic, which looks like this. And I'm going to cut off 15-inch pieces. So again, your razor cutter here comes in handy. And also these mats are fantastic because they've got measurements in them. Okay, so I need 2 for each mask. Let's see why. So now we have our pattern, and we've got all our reference dots on it, and we're going to put a couple extra pieces of tape on here to keep this thing from moving when we start actually sewing. So I'm going to put a couple more pieces here. Keep everything flat. Make sure that there's no kind of bubbles happening in the fabric between the 2 layers of fabric. I'm going to do a couple points in between where the elastic is going to go. You gotta make sure that this tape that you're using is really easily removable. You don't want a really permanent tape because then it'll start pulling off the threads of the material itself. And we don't want to do that because it will affect the integrity of the thread of the material. So now it's really well referenced. You can do anything to it. It's not going to slip. It's not going to bubble up, and you're not going to have inaccurate a fit of this mask. So before we get started, I like to draw a little extra thread because if it's too short, it has a tendency to get pulled back in, and then you don't get a good stitch. Now, the 2 types of stitches that we're going to be doing are a zigzag stitch and a straight stitch. So in my machine, which is different than every machine, I have a knob up here that sets the width of the zigzag stitch. I currently set it to 3, but for your case, it's basically as wide as the piece of elastic. So you may have to find your own reference point for that using your own sample fabric before you actually start sewing this. And then I'll first make a zigzag stitch, and then a reverse zigzag stitch, and then I will make a single just a regular single stitch over the top of that. So let's get started. We're going to take the elastic and we're going to put it in between these reference points, in between the 2 layers of fabric. Hold on to it like that, put it through the machine on the other side, Using your fingers, hold it down. Make sure it's not slipping out of place. Get it underneath your presser foot. Drop your presser foot. Pull both threads a little bit. The one that's underneath, put underneath the fabric, and the one that's over, make sure it's on top of the fabric. And I kind of use my finger and hold on to it so that it doesn't get pulled back in, and kind of ruin it'll just end up with a messy stitch. So let's get started here. I've got my stitch width set to 3 for the zigzag stitch, and I'm going to start going. You can kind of go slow if you're uncomfortable. Now I've gone forward. Now I'm going to do a reverse stitch. Just kind of strengthens the whole thing. My machine, I have to lift this up while doing that. I'm going to flip back, and then I'm going to set it now to a single stitch. So instead of going back and forth like this, it's just going to go up and down, forward. And so do that to the end of this, and go back, do a reverse stitch again, and we are done. That was the first one. Pull that out. Do a little cut here. Go ahead and trim these if you want. You can trim them all at the end, whatever you want to do. Trimmed all the threads. Got a nice looking stitch. Alright, not bad. Alright. Should be good on both sides. Looks like that. So there's a zigzag stitch and there's an overprinted single stitch as well. Now, when I take this elastic and put it to the other side, the top two go together and the bottom two go together. So this one, if you put a piece of elastic here, its matching end point is over here along the top. And you want to make sure that it's put in such a way that there's no bending of the elastic. You want it to fit nicely over the head. You don't want there to be kinks in it. So I'm gonna put this one in now. My little 2 pieces of thread. I like to take the top one and put it up here in my cutter. And drape it over that so that when I slide this through, there's a space there. And put that through. Make sure you're not sewing the elastic to this part. Okay, so that's good. Dropping my presser foot, setting my stitch length to 3. Reversing, stitch length to 1. Reversing, all done. Once you get one of these elastic things, a whole set in, this whole pattern becomes much more stable. You can actually remove all the tape now if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it there for another minute. Pretty good, right? Nice, perfect little stitches. And these things are just not going anywhere, no matter what you do. They are locked into place. Let's go ahead and remove all this tape that we put on there. Again, do it in such a way that you're not aggressively pulling off all the fibers. There'll be a little bit of fiber residue, but not much. Especially with Scotch tape. Any other kind of tape will pull off too many fibers. I'll leave these last 2 pieces on here just temporarily. So next thing we have to do is sew the darts. So what I do is I take this and see how there's 3 points, right? I find the midpoint of those and kind of fold it such that the 2 bottom parts of the triangle, the black dots, are together, and this apex point is along the ridge of the fold that I made. So once you have that, kind of fold it, crease it a little bit, and then put it in your machine. This is the hardest stitch on this. So line up your base points, those 2 black points at the bottom of the triangle, directly underneath your presser foot. Make sure your stitch is set to 0 width and a length of about 2. Okay, so let's go. We're gonna go a little bit in. And you're gonna go all the way up to that point. Go slow here because you don't want to overshoot too much. And then reverse. And we are done. So now we've got this dart sewn across. What you can do is you want to cut along the outer edge, the interior edge where that crease is. You want to cut along there, but don't cut your stitch that you just made. Cut really close to it, but don't cut it. So we end up with something that looks like this. Right? Stitched, and when you open it, it kind of looks like that and doesn't pull apart. Alright, so let's do the next one. And we're ready. Don't go too far beyond. But you have to go all the way to the edge. If you don't go, you leave a gap and then this mask is useless. You have to do this step before you do the outer perimeter because you have to fold these darts into the stitch. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Okay, so now we have this. Take your dart, kind of fold it and line it up so that what I'm doing, let's show you how I'm doing it. Kind of line it up like that so that the edge on the lower part of the dart continues the curve of the pattern. You don't want it to be like that or something like that. You want it to be a natural part of that curve. It's a little bit of experience getting it lined up. But it'll end up looking something like this. Nice continuous curve. Once you have that done, you can start stitching. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is I like to stitch on the outside, so stitch into the fabric because all the mess ups will occur on the inside. It just looks neater in the end. So I'm just going to take the other side and start there so I can, on this dart, lining it up in such a way that it continues the curve. So we're going to start stitching like that. Yeah. It's a little bit like that, and when it's pressed together, you don't see any, it's just a nice flush stitch. So let's start stitching. Okay, so I'm going to put this guy in here. And now what you're going to do is you're going to stitch in a way that is about 1/4 inch from the edge. Most presser feet have a little guide on them that shows you where the center stitch is going to go, and the edge of the foot is about 1/4 inch away. So as long as you keep the edge of the material on the edge of the presser foot, you're in good shape. So let's start with a single stitch. We're all locked in. We're good. Oops. And we're going to start sewing. Now we're good. Now, what you should be able to see here, maybe not very well, is that we're about 1/4 inch, sewing a line about 1/4 inch, and I'm going to move this closer and see what happens. So I am about 1/4 inch from the center of the presser foot to the edge, and that's where my thread is on the edge of the presser foot. As you approach a corner, just slightly rotate the fabric. Don't worry if you're going beyond the 1/4 inch, it's not the end of the world. Right before you get to the last dart, you have to stop, and you have to fold it over, and so that it matches the curvature of the pattern. You don't want it sticking out at an angle. Fold it over a little tiny bit, not a whole lot. Maybe 1/8 of an inch, or 1/16 of an inch is the width of the fold. Trying, be not much. You don't want to use much of a fold there. Just a very small amount. And so, anytime you finish a stitch, it's a good idea to back stitch just a little bit, makes it more secure. So I'm going to back stitch a little bit. Done. Alrighty then. We are moving. Trying to get something that looks like a mask now. Alright, you can take off these last pieces of tape down here on the bottom now. They'll serve their purpose. Now, before we do anything else, we need to get that nose piece in there. I gave you guys aluminum nose pieces. These little things, right? Little pieces. These are good for some people. Apparently people in the hospital, most of Maria's colleagues don't like them as much because they're not long enough, actually. So I have some additional wire, 16 gauge wire that I've taken, and I curl the ends so that they don't pierce the mask, and I'm using that primarily now. And slide it up in there. You obviously want to get it almost exactly between these two elastic straps at the top. And I usually like to look at it through the light a little bit, and I can kind of see where it is better that way. I want to get it nice exactly in the middle of this mask. Sometimes you need to bend it a little bit into the curvature of the seam. Yeah, that's pretty good. I know you can't see it from the light, but maybe you can see it. I don't know. You see how going from this point to that point? Yeah, you can see it. That's the... Make sure it's in the center. Keep sliding. Once you get it in there, make sure you hold it really tightly with your fingers and don't let go. Now this next step is where you have to be really careful, or you have to have bought a lot of needles. Because if you run that needle into this piece of metal, you will break your needle and you'll need to replace it. It's easy to replace the needles, but you have to have some, so no one here wants to go out to a craft store right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is get enough thread so they can get pulled back in, pull out the bottom, slide this whole contraption underneath, find where that end point is, make sure you don't run into it, make sure your pressure foot is beyond it, and I like to line up the piece of metal directly underneath the left side of the pressure foot in that 1/4 inch between the edge and the center. Because my stitch width is 0, so it's just going to go right through the center. So I keep my finger on the piece of metal the entire time. I'll lay this down, and now I'm going to start sewing. Make sure I hold on to this guy with the other finger. Start sewing really slowly, and keep your finger on here and guide it between the center and the edge of the pressure foot. Do not let it run into the center. You'll be sorry. Go slow here. You don't have to run it all the way to the end. It's maybe a little tiny, maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch before the end. It's not going to move once you get in there. Do a quick little reverse stitch. And outcome. Alrighty then. Now we're starting to get something that starting to look like a bit like a mask. Not bad. That's good. Now we're going to do the last step here, and that is to make sure that thing is in the center, the nose piece, and then line up the apex here, this point down here at the bottom, with a straight edge, and where it intersects the top of your mask, and then just kind of press it. And that will bend the nose piece so you can flatten it a little bit. I need to do that for this last step here. Then line up these two edges here. And you'll see that it kind of forms it's not a flat surface anymore. It's kind of bend up like that. That's okay. Just make sure that when you stitch this that it doesn't shift or move. You're going to be sewing along this edge basically. So I'm going to put this in the machine all lined up. Now I find that it's good to move the end of your fabric about a 1/4 inch. Move the fabric about a 1/4 inch back, so the presser foot is about a 1/4 inch from the end of the material. Because what we're going to do is we're going to forward stitch a little bit and then back stitch to the edge, back here in the back, and then forward stitch again, just to make that a really strong stitch at the top. Line everything up, even in your future areas of sewing here, and hold on to it. Okay, so we're going to go forward a little bit. Again, we're a 1/4 inch inset here. I'm going to back stitch a little bit and go really slow on this guy because I don't want to go over the edge. Okay. Make sure everything's lined up before you continue. This is your last chance, otherwise you're going to end up with a bad looking mask. Everything's lined up. As you approach this little corner here, just rotate everything and your wheel should follow. It's not horrible if this is not exact. In fact, that was pretty bad. This is one of the worst ones I've done. My bad. Alright. So we've got this again. Put stuff off. Now, my edge looks pretty good on this side. Looks nice, but I kind of messed up. It slipped a little bit on that side. Not the end of the world, because what we're going to do next is we're going to trim this really close to the seam for this one part. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut really close to that seam and get rid of all this excess material. Again, like your darts, make sure you don't cut into your seam. Close, but not too close. Now it looks good no matter what I did. See, all of that part that didn't quite fit looks perfect. Now we're almost done. Basically I have a completed mask at this point. But we're going to make one more reinforcement stitch down here at the bottom. So I'm going to invert this, kind of fold it out, and we're going to sew from about a 1/4 inch on the other side of this fold all the way across all those folds to the side over here. And we're going to do a back stitch at the end so that it's nice and secure. Actually, a back stitch at the front and the end. Alright, let's get started. Oh. Yeah, actually this one I probably do want to start from the front side and going to the back. So kind of pull this in such a way that it's not all bunched up in the front here. You don't want it all bunched up like this when you sew it. You want it kind of pulled into a nice, almost straight line from here to here. It won't be possible to get it exact, but as close as you can. Okay, so forward stitch, a couple of stitches, and then back stitch, and then forward stitch again. Back stitch at the end, and we're done. Finish the mask. Yay! Party. Once you get going on this, and if your things are already cut and all that kind of stuff, you can actually push one of these out 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And if you have no problem with your machine, if your machine starts acting up, sky's the limit. Voila! We have made ourselves a N95 equivalent mask. Yay! Now you shouldn't do what I'm going to do now, which is to put it on. You can see, by the way, that these are perfectly fitting elastic. See how there's no twists in the path along the length of the elastic. This is what you're looking for. All right, let's try this going on. don't want to put it on, you can test out a couple yourself first, but the ones you actually donate, you don't want to actually try them out. Alright, so for me, I don't want to shave my beard, so that's why I'm wearing it in kind of a weird way. This makes a nice seal here. You can press down here, and it's perfect. Most normal people would wear it like this, where it goes under the chin, if you don't have a beard. And voila. Enjoy. Make tons of them. Just joking.